So this is Wildland Urban Interface Part 2. I went back a couple of slides just to kind of make sure we're all on the same track, especially if you took a little break between videos. But I want to go all the way back to the beginning of this course. We talked about the 6 A's of wildland firefighting. And we start, before you ever fight a fire, you have to have awareness. And awareness starts with knowing your 10s and 18s, knowing your LCES, being familiar with your IRPG, practicing look up, look down, look all around, being in good physical condition, having good training. All of these things help us as then we come to the fire with an awareness of what's the weather, what's the fuel, what's the topography, and assessing that fire. So we're looking for alignments. That's our second A. Alignment that's negative and alignment that's positive. We don't want to be in a negative alignment situation where we've got fuel in between us and the fire when it's going to be coming up a west slope at 4 o'clock in the afternoon with the wind in its favor. So we're looking for opportunities to make progress on the fire where it's positive in our sense, where maybe it's a backing fire, or maybe it's slowed down in lighter fuel or whatever, or heavier fuel where it would slow down. Then we watch for awareness and alignment, and based on that, we realize now we're going to make an assessment. And that assessment of the fire, our tools and all that we have is going to lead us to an action plan. And that's our fourth A. But we talked about how that fifth A, or maybe I got my numbers wrong here, my fourth A, arsenal. Arsenal, so awareness, alignment, action plan, assessment, action plan, arsenal. So fifth and sixth, I get my numbers mixed up. So our action plan is based on our arsenal. Our arsenal is based on our action plan. So do we need to call for more resources? So if we are going defensive, we're going to need more engine companies to go protect those properties. And then lastly, we talked about our sixth A as assignment. So our action plan, those last four, they're all kind of constantly happening. We're constantly assessing, we're constantly updating our action plan, we're constantly assessing whether we have enough resources or not, and then giving out assignments. When the assignments get done, the fire goes out. Okay, so let's move through this one real quick. We talked about, so do I need more resources? And the need to make sure that we've got the right kind of engine companies. Do we need type 1s or type 3s? Are we in very off-road conditions, or are we now protecting structures? So we need to, when we ask for our strike teams, don't just say I need 5 strike teams. What kind of strike teams? Type 1, type 3, type 2, whatever you need. This is going to lead to our initial actions. Our initial actions are where we're going to work in 1 hour blocks. So we're going to go to one house or go to one neighborhood. Maybe our chief splits us up. You know, this engine takes that one, this engine takes that one. And we're going to base our actions on our environment and those structures and those that are threatened. Can I protect them? Can I not protect them? Do I need more resources? Do I not need more resources? So we need to match the anticipated threat with those firefighting resources that we have or need. If you ask for additional resources, the ICS system requires that, number one, you have a command post, and whenever you ask for more, you got to have a staging area. So where are we going to send them? Usually it's some park or some huge parking lot or whatever it might be to be a staging area, and the IC sets that up. doesn't actually set it up, decides where it will be. So what kind of resources are we going to need? Well, usually on a wildland-urban interface fire, we need everybody. Pretty much everybody but the Navy, right? We need the bulldozers, the heavy-duty workers. We always have to consider, are we allowed to use bulldozers? If we're in the national park, maybe even in the national monument or national forest, bulldozers may not be allowed. Definitely not in national park, definitely not in a wilderness area. Forests, it's going to depend. So, we got to consider that. Call for the Air Force, and as soon as we know we've got a big fire, we need to call for the big tankers so that they can start doing retardant drops. But we're going to get our helicopters right away, and we can ask for more and more and more. Let's get the hand crews working with the engine companies. Engine companies are going to be doing the structure protection, but the hand crews are the ones that are going to start making some progress on the flanks and getting an actual fire line around this fire. Don't forget to ask for law enforcement. We need their help. They're going to help us with traffic control and setting roadblocks. We might need to call for animal control because a lot of these fires happen in areas that have ranches and horses, and so we need livestock control, and volunteers will come in and help evacuate animals that are good with animals. Listen, those of us who are not horse people, you don't want to be, those things weigh about 1,000 pounds, and if you're not familiar with horses and things, don't just open a gate and let them go. This is a big mistake that firefighters make sometimes. Let's let people who know how to deal with animals come in and take care of the animals. We got to get the utility companies in there. So make contact early, get them shutting down power or helping with those power lines that are down. The road department's going to help us close roads and provide some heavy equipment. Let's get the Red Cross to come. Hey, first of all, the Red Cross are going to come and bring you some food. So you want them. Get those disaster relief organizations. Yeah. Now, the captain's not going to call for FEMA to get involved or for federal aid. That's going to be the governor's job and our chief's job to ask the governor. And then the governor is the one who has to ask for federal assistance. But don't forget to use the media on our behalf, to our advantage. Get the news out of where evacuation areas are via the media. So let's get to the nuts and bolts here. As we go out and start protecting these structures, we need to use a triage method. Now, a classic triage method has been the defensible prep and hold, defensible standalone without staffing, prep and leave, or rescue drive-by. Now, there's different ways to say this, but this is the basic. We can defend it, we can't defend it. So first of all, if we can defend it, we're going to either prep and hold, or maybe even decide this home is so defensible it can stand alone without staffing. We might do a little bit to make sure it's safer, but basically we're going to leave because we think it won't burn down. Then there's those that aren't defensible. Now, some that aren't defensible, we might do what we can to prepare it. But if there isn't a good safety zone, there isn't proper defensible space, we're going to maybe do a couple of things. Throw the furniture into the pool. Clear some of the brush around the house. But we're not going to stay and be there when the fire arrives. Opposite of the other one, where we feel it's so defensible that it's going to be able to stand alone, but we don't think this is a good situation. We're going to do what we can, but we don't want to be there because it's not safe. And then lastly, there's the rescue drive-by, where we want to just make sure that people are not in that building that we consider not defensible. Listen, there's a lot of young kids that are latchkey kids these days. children that could be alone in that home, and you drive by and don't even check, that would be a huge mistake. Make sure that there's no one in that home that you don't think is defensible before you leave. So I always like to talk about Chief Gary and Chief John Harris from LA County. They teach classes all around the world on wildland-urban interface firefighting, and they have a program that, in fact, their process is in your IRPG. They wrote that portion about structure triage. So they define defensible space, I'm going to just read this, as a real-world combination of terrain, fuel load, barriers, construction, and assuming different weather patterns to establish the fire behavior prediction. In addition, they believe that we should consider negatives and positives to assist in our judgment in structure triage. We don't just look at it and go, yeah, we can defend that. No, we can't. It needs to be logical. It needs to be based on science. So a few of the negatives, now there is a PDF that's in this module that is their paperwork that they pass out at every one of their lectures. So this is just a few of them. A few of the negatives. If you're on a structure, or if you're thinking about defending a structure that's on a slope, that's mid-slope, with fire approaching from the lower elevation, you just need to see that as a watch out. A structure that's in a draw, chimney, or box canyon is in grave danger. A structure that is going to require you to locate your engine on the side where the fire is going to be coming from. So don't be between the structure and the fire, whether as personnel or your apparatus. You don't want to be there. A structure that has vegetation up against the structure doesn't have adequate clearance. And then lastly, we've talked a lot in this class about aspect, the direction that the slope faces. If you're on a south, southwest, and west aspect, these are the most hazardous locations in Southern California to defend a structure. So think carefully before you try and defend one in that area. You don't want to be a statistic, but like the Glendale firefighter in Calabasas that was burned severely. Now, some of the positives, we're looking for a structure with a good 100-foot clearance or more, and no ornamental vegetation near the weak points of the structure, under the eaves. Italian cypress underneath the eaves. Surefire, it's going to get those cypress on fire, go into the eaves, go into the attic, burn that house from the top down. Structure where your safety zones jump out at you. This is good. Where we have large green areas or east access to a non-combustible exterior and roof. A fire that's approaching from a higher elevation, coming down with little or no wind. You know what, even if it is coming with wind, coming downhill, it's not going to be as ferocious as going uphill. A backing fire of any kind, fire that's burning against the wind or against the slope. So generally speaking, structures on a north or an east aspect are safer to protect than those that are on a west or south aspect. So how do they define their triage? Well, they have 4 categories like the other, and it's defensible or non-defensible, just like the others. But they like to throw in the acronym of LCES. So you should always ask yourself when you pull up to every structure, first, can I get a good lookout, communication? Do I have an escape route? Do I have a safety zone? So if LCES is in place, now we need to question ourselves, is it defensible or not defensible? So defensible that requires little or no attention, maybe all we do is we do a patrol status, check for homeowner presence. It can either stand alone or be patrolled. Then where we have LCES and we consider it defensible, well, then there's those that are going to be fire department staffed, where we have a safety zone that we feel is good enough, and the structure and the area around it is of the kind of situation where it has a high probability of ignition, but we can protect it. So it's defensible. Then there's the no LCES. Well, if we don't have LCES and we don't consider it defensible, we're going to prep and go, or we might say it's going to be non-defensible rescue drive-by. So in those two cases, we're going to check, make sure nobody's there. We might prep and go. So we might cover it with retardant or Class A foam, barricade gel, whatever. Turn on sprinklers. Use what you have, but then leave because you don't have LCES. But if you don't have LCES, you don't consider it defensible. At least make sure that there aren't people inside that are staying. And like I said, children, consider the children. So the primary considerations, whether you use the Harris method or the one that CAL FIRE uses that's popular today, or whichever method you use, the primary considerations are, first of all, firefighter safety. Do I have LCES? Secondly, what's the terrain? And which way is the fire going in relation to that terrain? What kind of structure construction? Does it have wood siding? Does it have wood shake roof? What kind of fuels are close to the structure? What's the fire behavior? What kind of resources do we have? Do we have water? Do we have access to water? Well, that's going to give us a little bit more of a comfort level. Now, don't think that an 1 3/4 line is going to stop a Santa Ana driven fire. Even if you've got a fire hydrant and you've got tons of water, you're not going to be able to stop 200-foot flame lengths, okay? So don't be confused by that. Hey, my phone's ringing. Okay, my wife will get it. So one of the things we need to ask ourselves is, when is it time to cut and run? When do we need to make that decision? We're out of here. Well, when the fire is making significant runs in our area and we're getting area ignition with numerous spot fires, that's a sign that we need to just cut our lines, save what we can of our equipment, and get out of there. Go to our safety zone. Escape routes, if it looks like they're going to become unusable, or unstable, look at that bottom picture. Would you go down that road to protect a structure? I wouldn't. Okay, so if the roof is more than 1/4 involved, we're going to cut and run, or we're not. If we arrive and it's more than 1/4 involved already, we're not going to even try and attack that. Interior rooms are involved. We're going to let it go. A lot of times the glass breaks, the fire gets into the house before we get there. That happened to me once in Porter Ranch. Actually, I got there just in time. The glass broke. I was able to put out the fire in a gazebo, checked inside, and it had not, timing was perfect. I got there just before those drapes would have caught fire and the house would have been a goner. But fortunately, the window broke. They lost their gazebo and their jacuzzi and a shed, but we saved the house. We really, really want to think about how to stay mobile. Well, when we set up, we're going to put some a hose line on one side and a hose line on the other. If you have reel lines, we're going to use those reel lines. We're going to take 2 reel lines down. We're going to ladder the building. We're going to do any preparing that we can. We're going to make sure that we've communicated what our safety zone is, and we're going to be ready to go. If we need to, we can pick up our lines really quick and cut out and get out of there. Don't forget your ladder. So, as a rule of thumb, don't connect to a hydrant, but what you can do is you take a hose line and drop it in the tank from above. Listen, if I drove away and that hose line was still there, it's just going to pop out of my tank. And it's not a big deal because it's just a little hinged top on the tank. So when reloading and time allows, drain our hose, fold it in an accordion lay on the hose bed, or use a figure eight. And those of you who know what I'm talking there, you can just pick up a hose really quick, taking it from left arm to right arm, left arm to right arm, using a figure eight, tie it in a knot, throw it up in the hose bed, and get out of there. If you do have to cut and run, make sure that you get your nozzle and your ladders, even if you have to leave hose behind. But if you've got reel lines, we can pick up reel lines really, really fast and can get out of there really fast. When you do leave, if you've been protecting and now you're going to move to the next place, if time allows, make one more search for hidden fire and maybe make a plan or communicate for a patrolman to come by and check the structure later. When we are moving from place to place, everybody needs to keep their eyes open. This is not the time to catch a little snooze. And you'll be tempted to. I've fallen asleep in the back of a rig more than once. But when you're moving, constantly check the progress of the fire, check the hazards around, watch for downed power lines, watch for rolling debris, watch for those weird bridges and smoky conditions. But also remember, like I said before, when you're facing backwards as a firefighter, sometimes you're going to see things that the captain and engineer don't. So keep your eyes open, watch for safe areas and for dead ends and things of that nature. Use your water sparingly, and if there is a hydrant in the area and you can top off. But remember, watch for, do we still have water pressure? Do we still have flow? Is the electricity off? If the electricity is off, it's just a matter of time that we're going to run out of water, because those tanks up on the top, they might have 1 million gallons, but we can go through that pretty fast in a fire. So are we dependent on electrical power for pumps to push up to those big tanks? If so, we've only got a small amount of water before we run out, so be careful. Use water or foam to cool the sides of structures, but don't spray water at the flame. It's a waste of water. Okay, my phone just rang and it was an important phone call, so forgive me. I had to take a little pause there. Again, use the water on the structures, use the water where it matters. Don't spray it at the flame. And if you have Class A foam, foam a house if you've got enough foam and enough water. But the main thing is to use your water wisely, especially to protect you and the structure. So Class A foam can be really helpful. And good thing about Class A foam, if you are using it with the right kind of nozzle and you're getting at least a medium style foam, it'll stick to the building. It'll even stick to the eaves. Of course, gels are even better. They last longer. They can last, they say up to 72 hours. I wouldn't believe that. But they'll last more than a day, whereas Class A foam just lasts hours. Think about when you're protecting these structures. Hey, we're almost done here. We're on the last 8 slides. Think about the places where your fire is most likely to get into the attic or get into the building. So watch for flammable roof or siding materials. Eave openings are really one of the number ones. Or your vents on the sides of the house. The embers get in there, and if there isn't adequate spark arrestor or wire mesh on those, you're going to have issues where the fire's going to get in the attic. Once it gets in the attic, it's pretty much over. Openings such as those unscreened vents or open windows. So one of the things, you want to be really careful going in houses. You want to pay attention to their privacy. But a lot of times we'll go in and we'll just do a once around in the house, making sure all doors and windows are shut. Pay a special attention to decks and firewood piles. They're just notorious culprits. Those flammable roof materials, those eave openings, all of these things, they're what causes problems. So sometimes it's going to be impossible to adequately prepare a structure, and they're going to be lost. So we've got to move on to the ones that do have a chance. We saw this slide on the bottom once before. You drive up to a house that looks like this, you drive away. Make sure somebody's not in there, but other than that, you drive away. So conditions to be considered is, do we have defensible space? What's the exterior of the structure? Interior, not as big of a concern, but we want to make sure there aren't any entry points. What are the hazards around? Have you looked to see? Are there open septic tanks? Are there pools? Are there ponds? Are there things that you could fall in that could really injure you? Pets and livestock. Fire line construction. Do we have a fire line? Is there, sometimes there's a road around this place or whatever. What kind of on-site protection do they have? Do they have sprinklers that can be turned on, hillside sprinklers? Those are great when they can be used. So when you move into an area, I've said some of this, but we're just double checking here as we close off. Note the landmarks, note the hazards, keep your eyes open, pay attention for potential safety zones. Always back in so that you can pull out in a hurry. If the driveway's short, you might want to park in the street, but park so you're not obstructing traffic in that area, okay? Other engines might need to come in and go. Be careful. I used to have a saying, pull up, look up. Always look up. Am I parking under a power line? Am I right next to a power pole? Am I in a place where structure collapse could affect my engine? Am I near the LPG tank? Park close enough to the building so you don't have to lay extensive hose lines. And if you can, be on the lee side of the building, which is where you want to be, right? So pay attention to all of that as you're pulling in. Always make sure the windows and doors on the engine are closed, because there's, stuff flying everywhere. Embers and firebrands. Don't leave flammable items exposed on top. Constant notorious culprit is the corn broom, just a regular broom that you use for sweeping out the garage. They're flammable. A lot of times we throw our gear on top of the engine, our go bag or our sleeping bags. Well, they're all flammable. So make sure that they're in some kind of a coffin or something that's covered, or in the cab with you guys. Don't have flammable stuff on top of the engine. Survey the area for hazards. Look for those holes, septic tanks, drop-offs, wire fences. Oh, I touched an electric fence once, and it was that smart. It was very painful. Look for low service wires, drop wires. Pay attention to the animals. Like I said, you don't want to get in the way of a horse. Pay attention to LPG tanks and sheds. A lot of times old outhouses are turned into sheds. So you see an outhouse, don't assume it's an outhouse, because barely anybody has outhouses anymore. What it usually is a shed now. And you look in there and it's full of pesticides and herbicides and other hazardous materials. So pay attention to that. Locate a garden hose, place it in your tank filler, right? Your engineer will usually do that. Seize every opportunity to top off your tank. If you're in between things and you're in an area where you feel safe, go ahead and attach to a hydrant, top off your tank, and then detach. Don't be attached to a hydrant in a way that you're stuck there. And don't deploy more lines than you need. So that's why LA County Fire, we had reel lines. They're really great for this. You just run one reel line on one side, one on another, and you're ready to go with just 1-inch hose, right? We're not going to be putting out a ton of gallons, but we're looking for all of those little spots that might get going into the structure. We're not doing big time structure firefighting here like we would with 1.75 inch and 1.5 inch. Don't put off more hose than you can pull up in a hurry. Stay safe. That's the number one thing. Remember your 10s and 18s. Remember your LCES. Remember to look up, look down, look all around. All of those things that we've talked about in this class, it's going to matter now more than ever. You're at an enormous threat. So be sure to eat and rest when you can and stay hydrated. These are all keys to going home after this fire. You might be gone. I was gone for 4 or 5 days sometimes. You might be gone for a long time. So I had a friend that was on a fire for well over a month at Yellowstone, and he was a captain that was being used to manage a National Guard hand crew. He said he came home to the biggest check he'd ever got. It was bigger than some of his annual pay in previous years. It was huge because he was on duty for 24/7 for a whole month. So, yeah, you will get exhausted on these fires, but it can be good pay. It's good work. It's exciting. It's fun. So go out there and do your best and stay safe. Be sure to look at the other materials in this module and watch some videos that I put in there. You got plenty of time to do that. So I'll see you on the next one a couple weeks from now.